Welcome, Dr. Bryana. It is such a pleasure to have you on here. I brought you on, obviously, as this is an important topic that I find, is again important, but also I know that my audience will definitely resonate as well. So, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's a pleasure to connect with you. I can't wait for our conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Same here. Same here. I always like to have our my guests talk about your background, about what you do, how you got started, your story, all of that, and what you want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to share that. I think the journey is a really important part of the way that we show up and what we love to do, right? So
Yeah.
I'll definitely say my journey feels unconventional. Like I'm sure a lot of people feel, we don't always end up where we thought we would. So I am a pharmacist by training, and I also provide genomics testing for my patients because I feel that personalized attention is important. The reason why that's important to me, though, is I've kind of been bounced around in the healthcare system like a lot of people have. I've also seen my family members go through that. And when I was in pharmacy school, I was just coming off the heels of losing my dad to prostate cancer. And there was an opening in pharmacy school that just, it was meant to be this way, that I got to jump on board with some genomics cancer research. And of course, that's really near and dear to my heart. So, what I was really looking at, what I was interested in, is understanding how our genes affect the way that we respond to medications and lifestyle habits and what we put in our body, what we eat, the supplements that we ingest. And I feel like that's really important as it pertains to my patients, whether or not they undergo genomic testing, is understanding that if we're really trying to achieve personalized medicine, we have to look at what's going on at the most baseline level, which is our DNA. So I'm a compounding pharmacist again by training. I provide customized dosage forms for my patients because I think we have to recognize that everyone is created so uniquely. So when we take an approach to our health and our wellness, the way that we show up, that really should be personalized too. And when I was going through the healthcare system, I didn't really feel like anyone looked at me like an individual. I felt like they were trying to put me in a box. I did not appreciate that. And so I definitely want to encourage people to seek other options rather than just the cookie cutter approach. So that's kind of how I ended up where I am today and doing what I do today.
Awesome. Yeah. And, I think a lot of us, if not all of us, can understand the system, the healthcare system. It's designed to kind of like a turnstile, right? It's a churn and burn. It's kind of like,
Mhm.
okay, 15 minutes. All right, let me give you, prescription, and then you're out the door. It's not really listening to you as a whole person. We are whole beings, so we got to take it into consideration what we need top to bottom. So, um, it's interesting because kind of going into a little bit of a story. So and it's kind of leading up to my next question, really. I actually 2 weeks ago had oral surgery, and I opted out of both the antibiotics and pain medication. That's just for my you know, what I believe in and what I don't want my body to go through. Yes, I went through some, of course, a little bit of feverish, a little tired, fatigue, all of that, and discomfort. I mean, of course, it's going to be there. But I was like, my body is doing what it's supposed to do to kind of move through and you know it works on its own, so it doesn't need all of these things that we think antibiotics. It does not 100%, not all the time. For some reasons, yes, it does. But what I'm getting at is that these antibiotics, these pain meds, these all of these medications are always pushed as like the the first thing. It's not like, how's your diet and all of that. So we're in a country that basically medications are running rampant. And you just said that you are, kind of a pharmacist or, by trade. But so as a pharmacist, can what is your take on the common problem or problems that overprescribing has on this country?
Well, we are a country that operates differently than other countries in that we practice this direct to consumer marketing for pharmaceutical drugs, which is a very interesting tactic. And if you're born and raised in America, that's what you're used to. So we think of that as kind of normal practice, you know. But if you wait until the end of the commercial and you listen to all the side effects, that should really be a red flag of, is this really something that is actually going to help me, or is it just kind of covering up the symptom and providing a pill for every ill, as we say sometimes, rather than addressing what the root cause is, right? And so I think it's a two-sided coin. I think that for people that are really struggling with symptoms and they go to the physician, they're looking for an answer, of course. They're looking to the professional to provide an answer for the symptoms that they're experiencing. And in many cases, they get slapped a label, right? You have diabetes, you have high blood pressure, you have cancer. And now I think although it provides some ease immediately that there is an explanation and we're not crazy for the symptoms that we're feeling, it's now become a label that we own. And I find a big problem with that because I I personally, as a patient, I was a patient before I was a pharmacist, want to feel encouraged that there's a way out of those symptoms. Just because I have an answer doesn't mean everything is fixed. And so I think that for one, we need to drop the labels. We need to understand that diabetes or hypertension or cancer doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey for the process. It's a process that our body takes to get there, and it's going to be a process to reverse. But as you just said, Elizabeth, our body is equipped with everything it needs to reverse that, right? I mean, we got there somehow. We can go back and heal our body somehow to return to what we call homeostasis or our normal. But when we start talking about this is not a conversation to go into the politics about medicine by any means, but when we think about where a lot of the incentives for money or reimbursements lie, and the pressure that is put on physicians to prescribe certain medications, primarily ones that have just been newly released, there are incentives there for them to prescribe these products, whether or not they've had a sufficient amount of clinical feedback yet, right? And so there is certainly a lot of money and a lot of time that goes into drug development if it's done appropriately. And there's also some products that are fast tracked and most certainly should not be due to their safety profile. But either way, in an effort to just kind of put our patients at ease, there is this problem, I believe, that we have, like you said, running rampant, of over medicating. And so, the long-term problem with that is that perhaps you walk away from the doctor's office, your doctor's appointment, with a prescription for, let's just say, an antidepressant. Okay, fine. For when it might not start working for a couple of weeks, so you'll get the full effect. But it also comes with a long list of side effects that we just don't want. And if your body was healing the way that it should be to restore to its normal, you don't have those side effects associated with it, right? So that in itself is a big problem, because those prescribing of these medications that just kind of cover up the root cause or put a Band-Aid on the symptom, usually down the line are going to require yet an additional medication to be prescribed to address the side effects of the first one. So those are the biggest problems I see with what we have going on right now. And I just think that we can be doing so much better for our patients.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I definitely agree. And, again, I thank you for kind of going through all of that. It is something that we just have to think about, right? As consumers and as patients, we just have to kind of be aware of the implications for all of these and ask questions. And that's, again, why you do what you do, I do what I do, so we can arm everybody with just this knowledge to where they can be better equipped and better prepared to ask these questions before just saying, okay, this is what I need, and really not ultimately need. So I just wanted to get it from your perspective. So thank you for going into detail on that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, let's dig in. You mentioned genomic testing, right? So this is something, again, I had a little bit of a personal I haven't taken any tests, but I actually, when I sought out a functional medicine doctor, he actually talked about um, really it's genetic. So actually, before I go into this, is there a difference between genetic testing and genomic testing? Is there a difference?
They're mainly used interchangeably.
Okay.
So I prefer genomic testing simply because of what I do. I feel like if we say genetic testing, it sounds for whatever reason, maybe like people are doing something that they shouldn't be doing with your
Mm,
genetic information. I don't know why. I think it's just kind of a perception that we have. So I
okay.
like to delineate, which is probably what you're about to go into, but we've got the medical side of it, and then we've got ancestry, right? So, but
Yeah.
we more or less use the same those two terms interchangeably. Yeah.
Got it. Yes, and that. Thank you for clarifying that, because obviously, yeah. When I'm going into this question, I want to be able to be asking it in a proper manner. But yeah, so basically I was predisposed to. I am predisposed to high cholesterol, and at the time I was doing a carnivore diet.
Hmm.
So I was like, obviously the doctor is like, well, you have high LDL, and just overall the markers were high, even though I was eating clean meat. I wasn't eating, like the fatty stuff, but it's still to where I'm more susceptible. And not, I'm not a vegan or anything like that by any means. I still do eat it, but knowing that that is, something that I am predisposed to, I am more cautious. So, what does healing, when you do genomic testing, what does healing look like on that? Like when you do that, what really comes after that?
So with genomics testing, first of all, what I do with my patients is they collect just a cheek swab, and that's how we get the information. And we're not looking at ancestral information. We're not looking at, what country you came from or whatnot, your relatives. What we're looking at is we're very specifically analyzing what our main concern is. So let's just say it's food, for example, or maybe you're starting to have cholesterol issues or you're concerned about it. Then we look at a certain panel in relationship to that. And so what I mean is that if our focus is cholesterol or nutrition, then we're going to look at X amount of genes of interest to us within the body that give us that information. That information that we get is very detailed about, like you said, the way your body responds to inflammation, the way your body responds to maybe eating more of a carnivore based diet versus on the opposite end of the spectrum, a vegan diet, or maybe a blend, something that contains both a healthy balance of meats and vegetables. And we can tell what your body is most likely to respond best to in regards to foods. We can evaluate hundreds of different types of foods that are likely to agree with your DNA and your biochemistry best, so that your DNA is working for you rather than against you. Right. But
Yeah.
so we have this whole idea of epigenetics and how the environment affects the DNA. Our DNA itself does not change, but the environment we place ourselves in, again, the foods we eat, the medications we take, all that good stuff is going to affect how our genes behave. And so back to your question about what comes after, is I design a plan with my patients with their goals in mind of what they're trying to accomplish to help their genes behave, not to misbehave, but to behave, really. And so that it's working for them rather than against them. So usually we come up with a type of meal plan, more so certain types of food groups, or most importantly, let's say a low inflammatory diet, or maybe a higher protein diet, where we're really looking at how those macronutrients of fat and carbohydrates and protein are allocated on the plate, because I find that nutrition is the hardest thing for people to get a hold of. So after our evaluation and we look at those genes, we understand how they're behaving in our body, we get more information about the nutrients that we can consume, about certain lifestyle habits, like you mentioned, your LDL. We have a balance of certain type of cholesterols in our body, right? Some are more favorable, some are less favorable. So we talk about optimizing certain types of activity for the individual. Is it high intensity? Is it low impact? That all becomes important on how your body responds to inflammation, and how exercise or diet might play more of an impact in the way that your body regulates cholesterol, because that's independent to everyone. So we're going to talk about lifestyle changes, nutrition, supplements that agree with our body, medications that may or may not agree with our body, and also important laboratory recommendations to follow to track your progress throughout the rest of your lifetime.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's so important to know this, right? Because we say, of course, or I say, and I hear others in the field say that our genes load the gun, but our lifestyle pulls the trigger. But how do we know, right? How do we know what our genes are doing? And yeah, sure, we know maybe cancer and diabetes and heart disease and all of that, but then we don't know the how, right? Or what is the pinpoint of that cancer? What is that pinpoint of the heart disease and everything else? Like, knowing that root cause is what is going to help us kind of, as you mentioned, that testing, and to understand that, then you can definitely give that specific protocol to where then it is going to be not just throwing spaghetti against the wall and being like, okay, well, that didn't work.
Exactly. That's what I always say. Spaghetti at the wall. I love that
There you
analogy.
go.
It's
I always love
messy.
that.
It's just
It's
messy.
very messy. So why do that? And then why have to clean it up? And then, it's that's where we're at this point. People want, and it's interesting. I'm just thinking about this. People want things, quickly, right? They want things like in a quick manner, but yet they're doing it opposite. They're going and sure, they're getting quick band-aids, but they're not getting quick fixes. They're not getting quick fixes that are sustainable to where they know of how, of what could, acerbate their, or, trigger certain things in their bodies. So yeah, that's awesome. How where are you located again?
I'm in Houston,
You're in
Texas.
Houston.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Yeah, and so do you know if there's a lot of genomic testing out there? Is there, because I haven't, I know of it, but I don't hear a lot about it.
Yeah, there's not a ton of options and awareness, which is one of the reasons why I'm happy we're having this conversation. And, this will serve as a platform, if anything, for people to be informed that it's an option for testing, because can be a really important part of anyone's treatment plan, depending on what exactly they're trying to achieve, right? But the reason that it's not really well talked about out there is that, we discovered or decoded the human genome several years ago now. So we know what that looks like. We have that information. But there has not been a guidebook for physicians or pharmacists or other healthcare professionals to implement this into the treatment plan. The other thing is it does require expertise to evaluate the information that you're looking at. And I wasn't formally trained that in pharmacy school. The reason I learned that is because I elected to do research, right? It's not part of the curriculum. It's not part of the curriculum in med school either. And so for that reason, it's not something that we think about automatically integrating into the treatment plan, right? So I do think, and my hope is that this becomes a staple. Let's go back to the time where, taking a lab test annually and having those normal tests done annually was not normal, right? It was not standard. Things have to be urged to be implemented. So I definitely think we'll get to a point where we will get there, but we're probably, a few decades away from that, honestly. Think about how if we had this information at birth for children of what they were going to respond to as far as either supplements or certain medications. What if we had that information earlier on? How much money, how much time, how much frustration, how many drug side effects would we be able to alleviate if we knew earlier?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
And that actually brings up a good question. Because we're talking about birth, right? Now, if the mother knows, well, obviously, two to tango. So if both parents know what they are predisposed, does that automatically go to the baby? You know what I'm saying? Like, how does that work? So if they know and they're taking action steps, is this the same action step that will help the baby?
So we still have to have the baby's results to
Okay.
know what their actual individual risk is, if you will, of either, let's say some sort of healthcare precaution or a certain type of cancer, carrying a certain type of gene, right? We still have to look at the baby. But what we can tell is how much of a chance the baby has of being a carrier
Mhm.
for some sort of a healthcare precaution. But we might not have the same genetic results on mom as we do on dad. We might be looking at different panels, let's say, for their area of interest. However, it can be a really good indicator of what to look out for in our kiddos. Especially when we're talking about certain autoimmune conditions and how that might put children at risk. Like when I'm thinking, because it's really common among my patients, is celiac disease or that autoimmune response to eating gluten products in the diet. So, I mean, you will see trends that get passed down to baby for sure, but we won't know exactly the risk until we look at the baby themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm thinking also celiac, but there's an uptick in autism, in, all of those things. So it's just an understanding of what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on, and how to, pinpoint all of that too. So have you seen that as well? Like
Oh, yeah. Oh,
on your
yeah.
end?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Big time.
Okay.
And, part of it has been a result of the changes over the past couple years of how our immune systems have been exceptionally stressed. But you also really hit the nail on the head with one thing you said about convenience. It's not just in our treatment plan, but it's in our diet too, right? I mean, we're busy, so we grab for packaged foods or foods that we can just microwave, products that have way too long of a shelf life and can cause a lot of problems. But
Twinkies?
yeah, hi, right, yeah, exactly. I was having a conversation with a physician a few weeks back, actually, and she was sharing with me some information about one of her kiddos. And, it's just reiterated for us in this field where we see it all the time. And we're starting to see particularly an uptick of conditions like autism. But let's remember that one of the most actionable steps that we have whenever we are trying to address an illness is food. And although genetic testing is very important in autism and understanding where those breakdowns are occurring, eliminating foods that are high in dyes and sugars and especially artificial sweeteners and gluten, that's a non-negotiable for autism. That just needs to go away because, the healthy person might eat those things and experience what they call a sugar high. But a child with autism might not even be able to break down those toxins because those dyes are toxins. Those artificial sweeteners are toxins. And if a child with autism, for example, cannot break it down, and then they're going to have a higher level of toxicity. They're going to have those outbursts. They're going to have those outrages. They're not going to be able to, fit in socially as they should, which is appropriate for their age. What we see in children with autism specifically is they almost without a doubt have a major breakdown in their cellular detoxification system. And what I mean by that is I'm talking about the mitochondria. The mitochondria, which we refer to as the powerhouse of the cell, right, is so important for helping us make appropriate amount of energy, but also break down toxins and get it out. So when we look at the genomic profile of a child with autism, they usually need a lot of support on their detoxification pathways in the body because they're either broken down or very, very weak. So I'm actually glad you brought that up because that's we're starting to see a lot more of it. And it's not only having a really big impact on the child, the patient, of course, but the caretaker, which is
Yeah.
typically mom or dad, right?
Mm.
It's definitely a 24/7 challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. And anyway, and it all starts with food. It
Mm-hmm.
all starts with food. And so we have to understand, where was the break, right? Where did it go
Mm-hmm.
wrong? Where did it's just looking back, 20 years ago, this wasn't a thing. This
Right.
was not a thing. And so we just got to understand, what happened, and it points to the food.
Right.
And how can we, eliminate or reduce the number and help the parents, right? The parents obviously don't, like you said, they don't want to be in this situation, and really they could take action, small steps, of course,
Mm-hmm.
very small steps, but it's achievable. It's definitely
Mm-hmm.
achievable. We just have to understand what and how.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. So thank
Yeah.
you, Bryana, Dr. Bryana. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you would like to either talk about, discuss, bring up, anything like that?
Well, I think as a closing comment, I really want people to hear this, that you should feel encouraged if you're thinking, things don't really add up with my physician or the way that this physician is treating myself or my child or my family member. Please continue asking the questions. Any good healthcare professional should be completely transparent about what their goals are. And I fully believe that as a healthcare professional, that I should meet the patient where they're at. So please find yourself a healthcare professional that believes that way. Stay encouraged, ask the questions, at least get informed, because then you can make the most informed decisions for your own health, because that is the most important thing. So I want us to remain encouraged as a society for as much different
Yes.
information as we have. We kind of need a straight line to healing. So just remain encouraged. The answers are out there.
Here, here. Yes. Couldn't have said it better. So, well, before I get to the very last question, where can my audience reach out to you, find you, all of that good stuff?
So you can definitely reach me at my website, which is bryana.gregory.com, or also on Instagram is probably the best place to send me a note at Dr._Bryana Gregory. And I'll answer any questions you got there on what I do or what I can offer, or even what genomics testing is. It's really new to a lot of people. So we can
Yeah,
have that conversation. Yeah.
definitely will follow you. So, and then the last question that I have here is, what is a favorite quote or any of words of inspiration you can give to me and my audience?
So, words of inspiration would be that regardless of how torn down you feel by a medical diagnosis, remember that your body did not get there overnight, and healing is also a journey. So please remain encouraged and remember this, that your body has everything it needs inside of it already to heal.
Yes, 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 yes. So much yes to that. I live by that, all the time. I tell everybody that. So thank you for spreading that awareness as well. So
It's a pleasure. Thank you,
thank you.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on here, Dr. Bryana, and everybody. I will put everything in the show notes. So just click and go straight to it. So thank you so much.
Thanks. Appreciate
All
it.
right. Bye bye.
Bye.